Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. So I'll be going over 10 players that I have rising or falling in my rankings so far this preseason. This is sort of taking into account everything we've seen so far with training camp, a little bit of the week one of the preseason. I'm recording this on Saturday, August 10th, so we've gotten a lot of the preseason action, but not quite all of it. But overall, I think there's a lot that we've learned so far and a lot that we can really take into account as we get into draft season. I'll try and provide you guys with as many updates as I can throughout the course of the rest of the preseason as well. That way you guys have, the most up-to-date information as you get into your draft. This week as well, I'll also be putting out an updated tier list for each position, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have a lot of content coming out, and you guys don't want to miss it. So yeah, this one should be a fun video. If you guys feel like I left out any important information, just let me know in the comments. That way I can help you guys, give you guys my take on anything that maybe happened. Maybe something happens after today that you guys want an update on before I get out to the next video. So just let me know in the comments, and I'll be sure to give you guys my opinions on all that. So yeah, a lot of fun. Really glad we got football sort of coming back, and we're just a few weeks out from real football. So excited to go, and let's get into this here. So I'll start things off with a big riser for me, and that's actually going to be Calvin Ridley, and that's in large part due to the fact that DeAndre Hopkins is slated to miss 4 to 6 weeks. He might be ready to play in week 1, but this is going to be a boost for every single pass catcher in Tennessee other than DeAndre Hopkins. The Titans still have plenty of weapons to the point where I'm not really worried about what this means for Will Levis. They've got obviously Calvin Ridley, you've got Tyler Boyd, Treylon Burks is still there, Chigakonkwo is good, you've got 2 talented pass catchers out of the backfield in Pollard and Spears. There's still a lot of reasons to be optimistic about what this, in theory, pass-heavy and up-tempo offense can do, and I think this just makes it more and more clear that Ridley is going to be the alpha, number 1 wide receiver in that offense, and if this offense surprises us and ends up being surprisingly good, Ridley's got the tools to potentially be a top 10 wide receiver, so he's moving up my rankings a little bit. He's someone that I'm a little bit more aggressively targeting in drafts. On top of that, I think that you could look at guys like Tyler Boyd as a later round flyer. You could look at Treylon Burks as potentially a late breakout flyer. Not really a believer in him, but Chig is maybe a decent flyer. Spears and Pollard, I think, have more upside going forward as well. And then as far as what this means for DeAndre Hopkins, I think he's still draftable, but he's effectively a dart throw at this point. He's an older player, shouldn't really be that not going to be himself, obviously. When you have older players get injured during training camp, it's tough for me to buy into those guys performing at a high level during the regular season. The next wide receiver on this list for me, another guy who's been rising up my rankings quite a bit, is Deontavian Wicks, and I just want to be clear, he was going to make this list before his huge touchdown he had on Saturday, so I'm not just super reactive to that touchdown here. This is in large part due to the fact that Jalen Reed and Christian Watson are both dealing with injuries in camp, and we know that both those guys haven't exactly been the model of health so far over the course of their careers. Dontayvion Wicks has also gotten some really glowing reports so far this offseason. Matt LaFleur is saying that he kind of sees a little bit of Devontae Adams in him. Obviously, we're not saying Dontayvion Wicks is going to end up being Devontae Adams, but LaFleur saw Adams. He's obviously seen Wicks. There's reasons to at least take that with a little bit of seriousness. Dontayvion Wicks has shown that he's a really talented player, and he's also got a chance to potentially be the wide receiver 1 on an offense that we expect to be really good in Green Bay. I personally am a big believer in Jordan Love. I think this offense is going to return a lot of value, and it's just a matter of which ones of these wide receivers end up returning that value for us. And Dontayvion Wicks is the cheapest of these wide receivers, and behind Christian Watson probably has the most upside. We know Watson's got that elite talent as well, but Wicks hasn't really had the injury concerns that the other guys ahead of him have. There's a lot of reasons to be super excited about Wicks. And then Romeo Doubs should be talked about as well. If Reed and Watson are going to struggle to stay healthy, Dobbs has also gotten some really glowing reports this offseason. There are reasons to be optimistic about Dobbs as well. So I think both those guys need to be a little bit more up in draft boards. I still prefer Reed and Christian Watson to them, but at cost, I think Dontayvion Wicks might end up being the best value here. So I think Dontayvion Wicks is a great target late in drafts, and he could end up being a surprise, honestly, top 24 wide receiver for us this season if things break right. Another wide receiver moving up my rankings just a little bit is Darnell Mooney, and unfortunately this does come because of an injury. We saw Rondale Moore go down with a season-ending injury in practice this week, so it's going to be effectively Drake London and Darnell Mooney as the 2 wide receivers that really have a stranglehold on this offense. Ray McLeod will operate as their 3rd wide receiver, but Mooney and Drake London will be the 2 wide receivers out there in 2 wide receiver sets, and he's heavily involved so far this offseason. He very much profiles to be the deep threat for this team, and we know Kirk Cousins has been really effective throwing the ball downfield. This should still be a really good offense if all the pieces get put together, and if things really click, there's legitimate upside for Darnell Mooney, who I think a lot of people have forgotten about. He sort of got buried on the depth chart last season, obviously behind DJ Moore. We saw him really get sort of spoiled the year before just because Justin Fields couldn't perform at a high level, but we saw him as an emerging, really talented player just a few years ago, and I think in the right situation, Darnell Mooney's got a shot to end up being been really good for us this season, and he's effectively free in drafts right now, but I think he's got a real shot to end up being one of our favorite flex plays this season, a guy who could be a weekly guy you put into your flex and just hope for that bomb touchdown. Should be involved downfield quite a bit. Is going to see a lot of valuable targets, and if things break right, I think Mooney could put up 1,000 yards and 7 or 8 touchdowns this year, and that would be absolutely fantastic for where he's being drafted. First running back on this list for me is going to be Kenneth Walker, and a lot of this is just because of reports out of camp here. We've heard the coaching staff say that they do view Kenneth Walker as a 3-down back in this offense, and offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb really hyped up his pass catching ability, saying he has really good hands and is one of the better pass catchers in the league. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity here for Kenneth Walker to really stabilize himself as a high-end running back. A lot of the reasons he wasn't that consistent running back 2, high-end running back 2, low-end running back 1 for us last season was just because he didn't really catch a lot of passes. And that makes it really tough for guys to put up consistent fantasy production when it makes them really touchdown dependent. We could see a little bit more of a high floor for Kenneth Walker this season, and we all know how talented he is. This is a guy that can house the ball anytime he touches it. Could easily rip off 3 or 4 50-yard touchdowns over the course of this season. He's got double-digit touchdown upside. If the Seahawks offense ends up surprising us and ends up being really good, then being a top 10 running back for Kenneth Walker is absolutely in his range of outcomes. It's definitely something that I want to have as the upside as my RB2 on my roster. So he's someone that I want to leave drafts with a little bit more of this season. He's a guy that I think could have a lot of upside, and if he's a really solid RB2 to have on your roster. Next running back moving up my rankings right now is Chase Brown. That's just because he's received a lot of glowing reports out of training camp that he's got a legitimate shout to be the RB1 in Cincinnati, and we know he's an explosive player. He really did show that he can do a lot with the ball in his hands after the catch last season, and the primary reason he didn't see a whole lot of opportunity last year was just because he struggled in pass protection, but that's really common for rookies. It's very possible that we see Chase Brown come in and be a much more effective pass protector this season. If that happens, he could certainly challenge Zach Moss for some really important touches in this offense. I still think it's going to be tough for Chase Brown to end up with the goal line role in this offense, but he is certainly more explosive than Moss. He's a guy that should profile to catch a lot of passes, and if he can be that change of pace back plus that third down back, that passing down back, and maybe not necessarily just get forcibly pulled off the field when they get near the goal line, I think he's a guy that could be a really solid option for us. And I think the ADPs of Chase Brown and Zach Moss probably need to get a little bit closer. I probably want to make a point of leaving every single draft with one of these 2 running backs because I know this is going to be a really good offense in Cincinnati. One of these 2 guys is going to be a top 24 running back. I'm not super confident which one it is. Up until this point, I really did think it would be Zach Moss, but I think there's a better chance maybe that Chase Brown's got a really good shot at it as well. So I want to leave any draft him in with one of these 2 guys, and I think that one of them will end up being super relevant, and Chase Brown's got a really good shot to be that guy at this point. Next running back that's actually been rising in my rankings lately just a little bit is Ezekiel Elliott, and a lot of this is because Stephen Jones talked up Royce Freeman as a really great compliment to Zeke, and what that means is that they're not necessarily viewing Rico Dowdle even as the locked-in RB2 here, and they really do sort of view Ezekiel Elliott as a guy in this offense. There have been some other reports sprinkled in that Rico Dowdle is some beat reporters' best bet to end up leading this team in rushing. That's not necessarily from the source here. That's sort of a guy's opinion who's been watching practice and all that. And I agree that Rico Dowdle is the more explosive player over Ezekiel Elliott, but Zeke's a guy that they certainly trust in this offense. He's good in pass protection. We saw this guy catch 50 passes last year as well. He's a guy who's probably going to have a goal line role and be trusted in passing down situations on pass protection. And we can see Zeke just sort of lackadaisically find his way to 40-plus receptions and maybe just score 8-plus touchdowns, and he's just free in drafts. He's going in the 10th round. He should be potentially the RB1 in what's going to be a really good offense, assuming Dallas figures things out with CeeDee Lamb and gets him in there. And I think there's a lot of reasons to be upset about taking Ezekiel Elliott, but especially if you're in a 0 RB build, he's a guy that I think you can play week 1 and probably play most of the season as a guy who's going to get you 15 to 20 opportunities, probably closer to 15, but also have goal line work, also see some passing down usage, and be a guy that might end up just being a low-end RB2 just because of how important he is to this offense, even though he's not very good at football anymore. Next up, we've got a player who's been sinking in my rankings just a little bit, and it's going to be Justin Herbert. And a lot of this is just because he's slated to miss time with the plantar fasciitis injury. And really, he should still be ready for week 1. This isn't necessarily a huge deal, but these injuries are tricky. If any of you guys have ever dealt with that before, you know that it can take some time to heal, and you certainly don't want to re-aggravate it. And what this also means is it's just time that Justin Herbert is missing in practice to pick up this new offense. Likely means that we're going to see a bit of a slower start for this Chargers offense in general, and I think it also hurts any hopes we had of Justin Herbert potentially being a more mobile quarterback in 2024. A lot of people, including myself, sort of thought the potential out here for Justin Herbert to be a more viable fantasy asset on what we expect to be limited volume is that maybe he'll be more involved as a rusher, sort of like, Greg Roman has obviously utilized Lamar Jackson out of the backfield a ton back in his days in Baltimore. We certainly didn't expect Justin Herbert to be Lamar here, but if we could see him be involved in read option a little bit more, scramble a little bit more, there was the opportunity for him to make up that lack of passing volume, which is a little bit more rushing production, but it's tough to expect that to happen if he's dealing with a lower leg injury. On top of that, I just don't think there's a whole lot of insane upside at that point for him. So he's still an okay dart throw for me. I just don't know what the upside is. He's a guy who I don't necessarily expect to throw the ball 30 plus times a game very often. He's not going to necessarily run the ball very often, especially with this injury. It's going to be a slow start for him, and it does put into question just a little bit how confident we can be with all the pass catchers in LA as well. They're all free, basically, so I've no problem drafting any of them, but I'm a little bit less optimistic about like my guy, Ladd McConkey, being a guy that we can trust out of the gates this season. Another guy who's been falling into my rankings a little bit is Puka Nacua, and this is just purely injury-based. He's in line to miss some time this preseason with a knee injury. We should still expect to see him week 1 against Detroit, so there's certainly reason for optimism that he'll be ready to go week 1. But it's always tough when guys get injured in training camp. It's obviously going to knock them down our rankings just a little bit, because it's really scary when you have guys that are hurt already going into camp, historically speaking, buying or drafting guys that are already hurt. It's really risky business. It's tough to be super excited about them. They don't normally have a very high hit rate, so there's certainly reasons to be concerned here. And then on top of that, there are a lot of reports out of camp right now that Cooper Kupp is all the way back, quote unquote, to being Cooper Kupp. And if that's the case, there's a chance here that Cooper Kupp is the number 1 wide receiver in this offense. I think there's plenty of room for both these guys to perform at a high level, but if Kupp is back to being his old self and Puka Nacua is playing a little bit hurt, there's reasons to be concerned, especially about the ADP disparity between Puka and Kupp. Puka currently goes at the end of the first, beginning of the second round. You can get Kupp several rounds later than that, especially depending on your platform. So at cost, I do most certainly prefer Cooper Kupp right now, and I think that if they're both healthy, I still expect Puka to be the wide receiver 1 here, but plenty of reason to be concerned about that. I prefer Kupp at cost. I prefer Puka over the course of the whole season if we're not including ADP, but I'd much rather leave a draft with Cooper Kupp at his cost right now than leaving it with Puka. Next up, another player who's been falling in my rankings a little bit is Jonathan Brooks, and this is purely just based off of the injury status here. Dave Canales went on record to say that it would be great to see Jonathan Brooks on the field as early as week 3 or 4, so it's just safe to say Jonathan Brooks is going to miss 4 weeks. This means that we're probably looking at a guy that's entirely useless for the first half of our regular seasons. Obviously, if you miss a month, there's going to be a ramp-up period. Just think back to Jonathan Taylor last year. It took several weeks for him to really emerge as that RB1 in Indianapolis and get all the snaps over Zach Moss. And Chuba Hubbard's a good player as well. So it's tough to draft Jonathan Brooks as a guy that you really can't anticipate using for the first half of the season. I don't mind drafting him as my RB4, but if he's someone that you're going to need as a contributor, I wouldn't necessarily count on him. So he's a guy that I think has upside over the back half of the season, but I don't know exactly what we can expect here. I think that Chuba Hubbard is a much better 0 RB target right now. He's a guy that's free in drafts and honestly could be a low-end RB2 for us for the first month of the season. Could end up being in a timeshare beyond that as well. So I like Chuba as a dart throw. Jonathan Brooks is a guy that I'm probably at this point not looking to draft. He'd be someone that I'd look to trade for mid-season as people are just, they haven't gotten anything out of him. He could easily be a guy that gets cut, especially in leagues that don't have IR. And he could easily be a guy that's just not going to contribute early on and probably come back, be limited in terms of his opportunity, and be a guy that could be had in a trade for pretty cheap. I don't really want to spend the draft capital on him right now unless his ADP changes quite a bit. And the last player on this list for me is going to be Josh Downs, and this is another injury-related thing, so that obviously sucks, because Josh Downs was having a fantastic camp reportedly, but he's now sidelined with a high ankle sprain. He's supposed to miss 4 to 6 weeks here. I would anticipate him missing a week or 2 to start the season, and that is going to open up a huge opportunity for A.D. Mitchell there, their second-round pick, along with Alec Pierce, so he'll be the third wide receiver there. Personally, I'm just not really targeting Josh Downs anymore. This is an offense that I don't expect to throw the ball at a very high clip. I also do clearly believe that Michael Pittman is the wide receiver 1 here. Jonathan Taylor will be involved out of the backfield some. A.D. Mitchell is another guy that I did eventually expect to surpass Josh Downs here. So Josh Downs is nothing more than like a last round pick for me, a guy you draft, put on your IR, and then see what happens when he comes back. But not someone that I'm super excited about at this point. I think A.D. Mitchell's a much better dart throw, and I'm still ignoring Alec Pierce. Just some other notes as well, some quick hitters. We do have Christian McCaffrey dealing with a calf strain. Should still be ready for week 1 here, but it is something we want to monitor. I would also note that in San Francisco, Jordan Mason is also sort of emerging as the RB2 in that backfield, potentially not Elijah Mitchell. So if you're in like a really if you're in best ball, I think Jordan Mason's a good pick right now. I think Jordan Mason's a good pick, like as the last pick in fantasy drafts and redraft as well. Could be a guy that maybe you're even starting week 1 if CMC ends up having to miss a game. It also makes me a little bit scared of taking CMC 101. If you want to take Tyreek Hill there, I don't mind it, but I still think obviously CMC's the 101 or 102 at this point. Marshawn Lloyd suffered a hamstring injury in their preseason game on Saturday. I think this just really hampers his opportunity here. There were a lot of reports out of the camp so far that A.J. Dillon's still running as the RB2. Makes me more optimistic about Josh Jacobs this season and really sort of limits my optimism in terms of what we can expect for Marshawn Lloyd this season. Jaden Daniels, he just looked awesome in his first preseason game, had a rushing touchdown, had a really great deep ball throw to De'Ami Brown. I'm excited to see what Jaden Daniels can do this season. I do think his ADP might get out of hand here. If he ends up going inside the top 10 at the quarterback position, I'll be out, but as the quarterback 11 right behind guys like Jordan Love, I think he's a good value. For the Bears, Khalil Herbert outsnapped DeAndre Swift 9-2 in the first 11 snaps with the starters. This is important because all the starters were playing. We saw Keenan Allen on the field. We saw DJ Moore. We saw Roma Dunze. Caleb Williams was playing. I don't want to overreact to this, but there is a chance that Khalil Herbert ends up being the first and second down back for this team. Then DeAndre Swift is the third down guy. If that's the case, Khalil Herbert is going far too late in drafts. He's someone that I definitely want to be targeting. And then Roschon Johnson's probably pretty clearly the backup here, so I'm not super interested in Roschon anymore. Keon Coleman ran the most routes of any of the wide receivers in Buffalo with the starters, like 2-1. He had 8 snaps compared to Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir having 4. So just keep that in mind. Not a huge deal, but he is a guy that we do expect to be involved in this offense, and a lot of reports were that he wasn't necessarily running with the ones so far. So good to see that in the first preseason game. Don't want to overreact to it. He also effectively ran deep routes on every single play, so he might just be the new Gabe Davis in this offense. So we'll see what happens there, but Keon Coleman's a guy that I am a little bit interested in just because we want to see what happens with the Spills offense. There will be value there, so want to keep in mind what happens there. And then Jordan Addison got a court date scheduled for October 17th. That makes things unlikely for him to be suspended in 2024. So for 2025, let's be wary of that, but for redraft only, you're probably safe drafting Addison right now. So that'll do it for the risers and followers this week. I'll be sure to do another one of these next week as well, just sort of going over all the training camp updates, reflecting on what we got from preseason. So you'll probably get that video on Monday of next week, so that way you guys I'll have had time to really digest all the preseason games. I just wanted to give myself this full week to get out all of my tier lists. So next I'll be doing the quarterback tier list, and I'll go through running back, wide receiver, and tight end to follow. So you'll be getting all of my up-to-date tier lists this week. That way we can get you guys ready to go for draft season this year. Hopefully you guys are enjoying these videos. If you did make it this far in the video, please do give the video a thumbs up. Helps with the algorithm and all that. And then, of course, if you haven't subscribed already, like I said, there's going to be a ton of content coming throughout the course of the rest of the offseason. Just make sure you subscribe to the channel, and that way you can be along for the ride all season long, and we can win some championships together. So appreciate you guys. One more note as well. There is still, I believe, 2 spots left in the subscriber league, maybe 3. So if you're interested, let me know in the comments. I can leave your email address in the comment as well. And if you give a good reason as to why you think you should be involved or anything like that, I'll make sure to send you an email, give you guys the invite link, and we'll want to get that draft scheduled here pretty soon. So let me know in the comments if you're interested. It should be fun. We got a couple spots left. It was a really good group last year as well. But yeah, appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you with the next video. Peace. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.